It's the ideological war that defined the modern era. A clash so fundamental it tore families apart, carved continents into hostile camps, and turned economic theory into a matter of life and death. For nearly 100 years, capitalism and socialism weren't just competing ideas debated in universities. They were opposing worldviews that nations killed and died for. Entire populations became experiments. Borders became battle lines. And behind every propaganda poster, every 5-year plan, every stock market boom, the same question haunted humanity. Which system actually delivers? But here's the uncomfortable truth that ideologues on both sides refuse to face. Pure capitalism destroyed lives just as efficiently as pure socialism. And the countries that survived weren't the ones with the cleanest theory. They were the ones willing to admit their system was broken and steal from the other side. Welcome to finance history, where economic dogma crashes into human reality and the textbook answers never survive contact with the real world. The conflict didn't start with a manifesto or a revolution. It started with suffering. Before anyone coined terms like capitalism or socialism, most humans lived under systems that would make both ideologies look merciful. Feudal lords owned the land and everyone on it. Monarchs ruled by alleged divine mandate. The masses worked until they died, owning nothing, expecting nothing. Economic mobility was a fantasy. Innovation was dangerous. And the idea that society could be organized differently, that ordinary people deserved dignity or opportunity, would have seemed like dangerous madness to those in power. Then the Industrial Revolution detonated everything. Britain in the 1700s became an economic volcano. Steam engines, textile mills, coal mines, iron foundries. Machines didn't just replace human muscle. They shattered every assumption about how wealth was created. Suddenly, individuals with capital could build empires. Productivity didn't just increase. It exploded. Goods that took weeks to make by hand now poured from factories in hours. Wealth accumulated faster than any king had ever imagined. And for the first time in history, it seemed possible that prosperity wasn't fixed. It could grow, but growth came with a body count. Early capitalism was industrial carnage. Factory owners worked laborers to the bone for starvation wages. Children as young as 5 operated machinery in 14-hour shifts. Cities became toxic wastelands. Slums bred cholera and typhus. Workplace injuries were routine and fatal. There are no safety regulations, no worker protections, no recourse. If you were injured, you were replaced. If you complained, you starved. The system generated immense wealth, but it flowed upward while the working masses drowned in soot and exhaustion. And that's when socialism stopped being philosophy and became a weapon. Thinkers like Karl Marx didn't invent socialism because they loved theory. They invented it because they witnessed horror. They watched capitalist factory owners extract maximum profit from human misery. They saw children mangled by machines while investors grew rich. And they concluded that the problem wasn't individual cruelty. It was the structure itself. Capitalism, they argued, was theft disguised as commerce. Profits were unpaid wages. Wealth was stolen labor. The solution wasn't reform. It was revolution. Tear down private ownership. Abolish markets. Let workers control production collectively. Distribute resources according to need, not greed. It was a vision of justice, equality, and dignity. And to millions suffering under industrial brutality, it sounded like salvation. But visions are cheap. Implementation is expensive. The first real test came in 1917 when the Bolsheviks seized power in Russia. Lenin inherited a nightmare. The Tsarist regime was dead. The economy was collapsing. Millions were starving. Infrastructure was medieval. And suddenly, the revolutionaries had to turn theory into reality. So they built a command economy. The state seized all land, factories, banks, resources. Prices were set by planners, not markets. Production quotas replaced profit motives. Private enterprise was outlawed. And in theory, this should have created efficiency and fairness. Everyone working for the collective good. No exploitation. No chaos. Just rational planning. In practice, it created catastrophe. Without prices, the state had no idea what people needed or how much to produce. Without competition, factories had no reason to improve. Without personal incentive, workers did the bare minimum. Goods rotted in warehouses while cities starved. Corruption became survival. And innovation stopped cold. The Russian economy, already fragile, collapsed into famine that killed millions. Lenin panicked and reversed course, allowing limited private markets just to keep people alive. But even as socialism stumbled in Russia, capitalism was busy destroying itself elsewhere. By the 1920s, market economies had delivered extraordinary growth, but the system was wildly unstable. Speculation ran unchecked. Monopolies crushed competition. Wealth concentrated in fewer hands, while workers barely survived. And in 1929, the entire house of cards imploded. The Great Depression wasn't just a recession. It was proof that unregulated capitalism could self-destruct. Banks failed. Unemployment hit 25%. Businesses collapsed. Savings evaporated. And millions of people who had believed in the market watched it devour their lives. Capitalism had promised prosperity, but delivered mass suffering. Meanwhile, socialism promised equality, but delivered starvation. By the 1930s, both systems looked broken. And then history forced the ultimate stress test. World War II made ideology irrelevant. What mattered was survival. And both systems performed in ways that contradicted their own propaganda. The Soviet Union, despite economic dysfunction, mobilized its population with terrifying efficiency. Central planning allowed the state to redirect every resource toward war. Soviet factories outproduced Germany despite being technically inferior. Authoritarianism, for all its horrors, enabled rapid total mobilization. Meanwhile, capitalist America became an industrial juggernaut. Private companies innovated at breakneck speed. Competition drove efficiency. And when the government coordinated private enterprise without controlling it, the result was overwhelming productive power. By 1945, the lesson was clear. Neither pure system worked, but combinations might. The post-war world became a laboratory with millions of lives at stake. On one side, the Soviet bloc doubled down on central planning. On the other, the West built regulated capitalism with safety nets inspired by socialism. And for 45 years, the Cold War wasn't just fought with weapons. It was fought with living standards, grocery stores, technology, and hope. The Soviet Union achieved remarkable things early on. Illiteracy plummeted. Industrialization accelerated. Housing expanded. Life expectancy rose. For a generation, it looked like socialism might actually deliver. But the cracks were spreading. Without market prices, the economy drifted into absurd waste. Factories fulfilled quotas by making unusable junk. Farms met targets by lying about harvests while food rotted. Innovation died because there was no reward for excellence. By the 1970s, the USSR could build nuclear weapons but couldn't produce decent shoes. The West, meanwhile, learned from its mistakes. After the Depression, governments introduced regulations, unemployment insurance, public health care, pension systems, antitrust laws. Capitalism became less pure but more survivable. It didn't eliminate inequality, but it prevented total collapse. And critically, it stayed adaptable. When problems emerged, the system adjusted. Socialism, locked in rigid ideology, couldn't. By the 1980s, the gap was undeniable. Western economies surged while Soviet citizens waited in line for bread. The Berlin Wall didn't fall because of military defeat. It fell because the Soviet system couldn't deliver what it promised. A system designed to eliminate inequality created new aristocracies of party elites and bureaucrats. A system built on rational planning devolved into corruption and stagnation. And when people compared East and West Germany, North and South Korea, the results were devastating. The experiment was over. Central planning had lost. But capitalism's victory was hollow. Because even as the Soviet Union collapsed, the West was brewing its own crises. The 1990s and 2000s saw capitalism mutate into something unrecognizable. Financial markets exploded. Deregulation unleashed speculation. Globalization stretched supply chains worldwide. Inequality returned to levels not seen since the Gilded Age. Corporations became more powerful than governments. Debt, both public and private, ballooned to unprecedented heights. And in 2008, the system nearly destroyed itself again. The financial crisis was a reminder that capitalism's core instability never disappeared. It just hid behind complexity. Meanwhile, socialism didn't die. It evolved. Young generations, crushed by housing costs, student debt, stagnant wages, and healthcare bankruptcies, started questioning whether capitalism still worked. Calls for wealth redistribution, universal healthcare, free education, stronger unions returned. Not the old Soviet model, but something softer, more Scandinavian. The debate reignited, but this time with a twist. Almost nobody wanted pure versions of either system anymore. History had made the trade-offs too obvious. Look at Scandinavia. These countries are constantly mislabeled as socialist, but they're not. They have robust free markets, private property, capitalist corporations. But they also have high taxes, strong welfare states, powerful unions, and aggressive wealth redistribution. It's capitalism with guardrails. Markets generate wealth. Government ensures it spreads. Innovation thrives. Inequality stays manageable. It's not perfect, but it works better than purity. Now look at the United States. A capitalist titan with extraordinary innovation, military power, financial dominance, and cultural influence. But also catastrophic inequality, crumbling infrastructure, unaffordable healthcare, an eroding middle class, and political dysfunction. Capitalism succeeded at creating wealth. It failed at distributing it, and the social fabric is tearing. Then there's China, the most paradoxical case of all, officially socialist, but functioning as authoritarian state capitalism. Private companies drive growth. Markets operate freely within limits. But the government controls strategic sectors, censors information, and crushes dissent. It's neither capitalism nor socialism. It's a hybrid built for control. And even China faces the same contradictions: debt bubbles, housing crises, demographic collapse, slowing growth. When you step back and look honestly, every successful economy today is a compromise. A mix of market mechanisms and state intervention. Private incentives and public safety nets. Competition and regulation. No country runs on pure capitalism. No country runs on pure socialism. Because reality forced every nation to admit that neither theory worked alone. And that's the lesson ideologues on both sides still refuse to learn. Economic systems don't shape human behavior as much as human behavior shapes economic systems. Greed doesn't disappear under socialism. It becomes corruption. Exploitation doesn't vanish under capitalism. It becomes inequality. Power doesn't evaporate in either system. It just concentrates differently. In markets, power flows to wealth. In planned economies, power flows to bureaucrats. Different paths, same destination. The real question isn't which ideology is superior. It's which system has better mechanisms to limit power, correct failures, and reward productive behavior without destroying social cohesion. And history's answer is brutal. The systems that survived were the ones willing to adapt, steal, and compromise. Capitalism endured because it could evolve. Laissez-faire became the New Deal. The New Deal became the welfare state. The welfare state became globalized finance. Each time capitalism broke, it reinvented itself. Socialism collapsed where it refused to change. Soviet rigidity led to collapse. Maoist China stagnated until Deng introduced markets. North Korea became a prison state. But socialism thrived where it merged with capitalism. Scandinavia. Post-1978 China. Parts of Western Europe. Ideology didn't determine winners. Flexibility did. To understand why, just look at what each system prioritizes. Capitalism prioritizes incentives. It unleashes ambition, risk-taking, innovation. People build, create, and compete because there's personal reward. But the cost is instability, inequality, and cycles that devastate the vulnerable. Socialism prioritizes equality. It reduces poverty, expands access, ensures basic dignity. But without incentives, productivity collapses. Without markets, information fails. Without competition, stagnation sets in. Both systems have strengths. Both have catastrophic weaknesses. And the modern world exists because pragmatists realize this and stop caring about ideological purity. Every regulation, every welfare program, every market rule, every safety net we have today carries the DNA of this century-long war. The mixed economies we live in aren't proof that one side won. They're proof that neither could survive without borrowing from the other. But here's what most people miss. The debate isn't over. It's shifting. The challenges ahead: AI displacing workers, aging populations, climate change, energy transitions, unsustainable debt, don't care about 20th century ideology. They expose weaknesses in both systems. Market capitalism struggles with long-term planning and social cohesion. Socialist planning struggles with innovation and adaptability. The countries that thrive in the next decades will be those that combine both most effectively. Market dynamism with public investment. Private innovation with social stability. Freedom with guardrails. If the last century taught anything, it's this. No economic system works without limits. Pure capitalism becomes predatory. Pure socialism becomes authoritarian. And societies collapse when wealth or power concentrates too much, whether in billionaires or bureaucrats. History didn't choose capitalism or socialism. History chose survival. And survival required compromise. Every generation has to renegotiate that balance, because the fight was never really about economic theory. It was about power. Who controls it? How it's distributed? Whether it serves the many or the few. Capitalism concentrates power in capital. Socialism concentrates power in the state. And the real struggle, the one that continues today, is preventing that power from becoming absolute. Because absolute power, regardless of ideology, always ends the same way. Oppression, stagnation, collapse. The propaganda changes. The slogans shift, but the pattern repeats. If this changed how you see the world, hit subscribe. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.